Welcome to Malice and Mystery, where shadows whisper and the unknown beckons. Step into a realm of spine-tingling horror, eerie mysteries, and chilling tales. From real-life paranormal encounters to unsolved enigmas and spine-chilling urban legends, we bring you the darkest stories from the shadows. Subscribe if you dare, and remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved. Creepy cases of stalkers who were never caught, from letters to deadly encounters. These stalkers were never caught by the police. These are the creepiest cases of stalkers who were never caught. Number 12. The cyborg stalker. The nightmare scenario for any individual is being stalked by someone who is not human. Well, this was the case for a certain woman named Mary. She had an ex-boyfriend named Robert, who was obsessed with her, and she constantly received threatening calls from him even after she broke up with him. To make matters worse, he would not take no for an answer and kept coming to her house uninvited. She told the police about all of it, but nothing was done because there were no signs of forced entry at her home, and there were no witnesses to the man entering her home, so the police did not think that it was a big deal. However, one day, Mary came home and found out that someone had broken into her house and vandalized it. She called the cops again, but when they arrived at the scene, they could not find any fingerprints or any other clues that would lead them to the intruder. Later on, another incident occurred where the stalker broke into her home and tried to harm her. She managed to call the police, and they finally caught the man. But guess who it was? It was none other than her ex-boyfriend, Robert. However, what made this case truly disturbing was the fact that while in jail, Robert claimed that he wasn't the person who had been stalking her. He said that he was actually a cyborg sent from the future to change history. What? Did he really think that he was a cyborg? Well, whatever his insanity may have been, the judge didn't buy it, and Robert is still behind bars today. Number 11. Playing dead. A man named John Paul Mac Isaac was a wealthy businessman and avid scuba diver. On January 4th, 1988, he went diving alone, as he always did. When he did not return home that night, his family began to worry. His wife even went to the authorities and reported him missing. A search was conducted, but nothing was found. And a week later, his body was discovered on the ocean floor near his boat, which was docked at a marina. While the police thought that it was an open and shut case of an accidental drowning, the family suspected foul play. They hired a private investigator, and the results were shocking. Isaac had been shot twice in the head before he was weighted down with scuba tanks and dumped into the sea. Whoever had killed him knew exactly what they were doing and had planned it well in advance. Despite this, the police never caught the killer, and the case remains unsolved to this very day. Number 10. The stalker who would not give up. It's bad enough to be stalked by one person. But imagine being stalked by two people who give up despite your repeated attempts to get rid of them. That's exactly what happened to Megan and her family. At first, it started off innocently enough with anonymous letters and gifts left on their doorstep. Megan and her husband, Tom, thought it was odd, but shrugged it off. However, things took a dark turn when they found scratches on their car and their tires were slashed. Megan felt uneasy, so she installed security cameras around the house. One day, she was reviewing the footage and saw two men lurking around their property. She immediately called the police and told them about everything that had been happening to her family. The officers agreed to keep an eye out, but nothing came of it. And soon after, more incidents occurred, like rocks being thrown through their windows and dead animals being left on their porch. The police were called again, but they still did not take any action. This meant that Megan and her family had to take matters into their own hands. They moved out of state and got a restraining order against the stalkers, but it did not stop them. They continued to show up at their new home uninvited. In the end, Megan was forced to sell her house and move somewhere else just to get away from these stalkers. And even then, they still showed up at her new home. Safe to say that this case will remain unsolved. Number 9. Love struck. There's nothing more terrifying than a stalker who has a crush on you. That's exactly what happened to Anna when she met David, a seemingly nice guy who was always around her at school. However, she soon realized that he was stalking her, and she tried to break away from him, but he wouldn't let her. He followed her home, broke into her house, and assaulted her. Luckily, she managed to fight him off and call the police. He was arrested, but somehow he escaped from prison and kidnapped Anna. He drove her to a remote cabin where he planned to keep her forever. However, after 3 days, he left the cabin to go into town. She used this time wisely and escaped to safety. The police searched everywhere for David, but he was nowhere to be found. Some believe that he's still out there and Anna will never be safe. Number 8. Letters from behind bars. When Margaret was just 16 years old, she met a boy named Gary. They dated for a while and everything seemed fine until one day when Gary confessed that he was already married. Despite this, Margaret still loved him and decided to run away with him. However, once they ran away together, she realized that Gary was abusive and controlling. She tried to escape from him, but he always found her and brought her back. After a few years, he was finally arrested for burglary. This gave Margaret the opportunity to start a new life. After he was sentenced to prison, she changed her name and moved to California. However, soon after, she began receiving letters from Gary. He talked about how much he missed her and wanted to see her again. She was horrified and wrote back saying that she never wanted to see him again, but he still kept writing to her. Margaret tried to ignore the letters, but then they started arriving daily. She was worried that something bad was going to happen, but the police did nothing about it. It turned out that Gary had bribed the prison guards to let him send her the letters. However, no one knows what his intentions were because he never made another move on her. Number 7. The wrong target. Josephine was a young woman living in New York City. She had been receiving anonymous letters and gifts for months, but she had no idea who they were from. She tried to ignore them, but the situation became more and more creepy as time went on. She started finding dead animals outside of her door, and once she even found a bloodied meat cleaver on her doorstep. She was scared, so she called the police, but they told her that there was nothing they could do. One night, she heard someone breaking into her apartment. She screamed for help, but nobody came. When the police finally arrived, they found out that it was just a false alarm. No one had broken in. But Josephine knew that someone was stalking her. She just couldn't figure out who. Number 6. An obsession that went too far. Erica was an actress who had been stalked by a fan for years. She had met him at one of her shows, and he had become obsessed with her ever since. He started showing up at her house and following her around. And she even caught him taking pictures of her without her permission. She told the police about it, but they didn't do anything. She was afraid that something bad was going to happen, but the police told her to just ignore him. Erica decided to take matters into her own hands and bought a gun. One day, she was at home when she heard a knock at the door. She looked through the peephole and saw her stalker standing there. She knew that if she opened the door, he would come in and hurt her. So she called the police. When they arrived, they found out that her stalker had broken into her house and had taken his own life. Number 5. Always watching. A woman named Helen had been receiving anonymous letters and gifts for weeks. She had no idea who they were from, but she was beginning to feel very uncomfortable. She started finding dead flowers and dead birds outside of her house. And once she even found a note that said, "I know all your secrets." She called the police, but they told her that there was nothing they could do. Helen was afraid that something bad was going to happen, but the police told her to just ignore it. One day, she went out for dinner with some friends. When she came home, she found a bouquet of dead roses on her doorstep. She was scared, so she called the police. When they arrived, they found out that someone had broken into her house and had taken their own life. Number 4. Stalking on social media. With the rise of social media, stalking has taken on a whole new meaning. Take, for example, the case of Sarah, who was stalked online by a man named John. John had been messaging her on Facebook for weeks, even though she had never spoken to him before. He would send her messages at all hours of the night, and she eventually blocked him. But then he started creating fake accounts and messaging her from those. She told the police about it, but they told her that there was nothing they could do. She was afraid that something bad was going to happen, so she deleted her account. But John was still out there, and he eventually found her on another site. He started sending her messages, and this time he was getting more aggressive. He threatened to come to her house and hurt her if she didn't meet him. Sarah was terrified, but she didn't know what to do. She told the police, but they told her that there was nothing they could do. She was afraid that something bad was going to happen, so she went into hiding. She changed her phone number and even moved in with a friend. But John was still out there, and he eventually found her. He broke into her friend's house and kidnapped her. He took her to a remote cabin where he had been living, and he held her there for weeks. Eventually, she was able to escape, and the police finally caught John. Number 3. Following her home, a woman named Clara was stalked by a man named James. He had been following her home from work for weeks, and she finally noticed him one day. She tried to shake him off, but he kept following her. She started running, but he caught up to her and grabbed her. She screamed for help, but no one came. She tried to fight him off, but he was too strong. He dragged her to his car and threw her in the trunk. She was terrified, but she knew that she had to do something to protect herself. She started banging on the trunk lid, and eventually James stopped driving and got out. He opened the trunk and started talking to her. He told her that he wasn't going to hurt her, but she knew that he was lying. She started screaming and kicking, and eventually he got scared and ran away. The police never caught him, but Clara was never the same after the ordeal. Number 2. The Phantom Stalker. A woman named Anna was stalked by a phantom stalker. She had no idea who it was, but she started receiving anonymous letters and gifts. She also started finding dead flowers and dead birds outside of her house. She called the police, but they told her that there was nothing they could do. One day, she went out for dinner with some friends. When she came home, she found a bouquet of dead roses on her doorstep. She was scared, so she called the police. When they arrived, they found out that someone had broken into her house and had taken their own life. Number 1. Terror in the mail. It's bad enough to receive threatening letters, but imagine receiving threatening letters in the mail that include photos of you and your family. That's exactly what happened to Tracy. She had no idea who was sending the letters. But they were getting more and more threatening. She told the police about it, but they told her that there was nothing they could do. She was afraid that something bad was going to happen, so she went into hiding. She changed her phone number and even moved in with a friend. But the letters still kept coming. Eventually, she was able to trace the letters back to a local post office. The police were able to track down the person who had sent the letters, but they were shocked to find out that it was someone that Tracy knew. It was her neighbor, and he had been stalking her for years. He had taken photos of her and her family and had been sending them threatening letters. The police finally arrested him, and Tracy was able to go back to her normal life. These stories are a reminder that stalkers can come from all walks of life, and that it's important to be aware of your surroundings. If you ever feel like you're being stalked, don't hesitate to reach out to the police for help. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales of the mysterious and macabre. Till next time, stay curious and stay cautious.